Welcome to my YouTube channel, and today we are going to be looking at Redux. We want to understand what Redux is all about, and just to give you a brief insight, it's actually a container for JavaScript applications, and what it is that it's a library that can be used for frameworks like React, Angular, and also Vue as well. So right here, we're just going to be cleaning up our template, our React template, and we just want to test out our framework, and we can take out some things that are not needed, and we just want to put in some text. So we are going to be just putting in something like understanding Redux, and we want to check how our web pages. Oops, that's an error. So we actually want that to read understanding Redux. So we just go back and correct that. And then we have, we just needed to put it in between the header. And we just put that there, understanding Redux. And when we double check, so that is what we want it to be. So yes, we have our framework set up, and now what we want to do now is actually install our Redux model. So for this tutorial, we're actually going to be installing Redux model just for this tutorial, but it is possible to make use of other methods, library that Redux currently offer. But for this tutorial, I will be using installing the npm install Redux, and I'm just going to copy that and paste that in my terminal. One of the core concepts of Redux is actually the fact that it's sort of like a single source of truth. So which means that, you know, your entire state of the application is stored in a single JavaScript object within a centralized store. So what that means is that if you have an application, let's say you have an application like an e-commerce application that actually has carts, that handles cart payments and all of that sort of features, with the cart, updating carts and actually adding to carts, things like that. That's one of a very good use case for Redux. So right here, we just install that, and then we would create a reducer function, and then this function is actually going to take in two parameters, which is the state and the action. And the next thing we are going to do is actually make use of the switch case. So now the switch case is actually going to have both an action and a type. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using yet basic but understandable types. So we're just going to have add for this case. And after every case, what we need to do is actually include a break. And that break actually allows you to actually differentiate between each of the cases. Now we want to also create another case, which is subtract. And remember when I said that one of the good use cases for Redux is actually to update things in your application, and to update things like increment methods, decrement method, things like that. So we want to also add another case, and we will have multiply case as well. And then we can then also break. Now, these three different cases that has been created in the reducer will be used to create our store. So the next thing we want to do is actually create, and we also want to return the state. And just a quick insight about the state. The state is, the state in Redux is actually immutable, which means that it cannot be changed. What it actually does is that it only dispatches actions. So here we are going to create our store. So we're just going to create a function store, and we are going to be using the create store method. So Redux has three main components, which the first is the reducers, which we created, which was the first function we created using the switch case that had the add case, the subtract case, and the multiply case. Now we have the create store method, and this method will actually take in two arguments. So we are going to be calling the reducer that we had created earlier on, and then we're also going to be passing a number 20. So what that means is that we are saying that if we decide to dispatch any of those actions that we had created in the reducer, we want it to add 20, the number 20 to that. So in doing this, for us to achieve this, we actually need to use another method called the subscribe method. Now, this method will be called anytime an action is dispatched. So it's actually so the actions are actually the payloads of information that send data from our application to the store. So they're basically just plain JavaScript objects, and they come with a type property that describes the action. So now we're just going to console log because we just want to see how our Redux store actually works. So we'll just console log new data. So we'll just give that new data, and then we can use our store and say store.getState. There are several reasons why you would want to consider using Redux in your application. First things first is Redux acts as a middleware, which means that this will allow for handling asynchronous actions, also handling things like login and even routing. So that's just one of the many reasons why you would want to consider using Redux for your application. Also, it offers browser extensions, and also in the browser extension, you also have the Redux dev tools that can assist in inspecting and debugging your application. So we can say that Redux provides a really good architecture for managing applications in state management for JavaScript applications. It's an excellent choice for managing complex states in larger applications such as e-commerce applications. So it has so many benefits. And like I mentioned earlier, the key components are the store, the actions, and the reducers. So now we are just going to be importing create store, and we're going to be importing that from Redux itself. Now we have our reducer, we also have our store. The next thing we want to actually do is use our dispatch methods, because for the reducers that we had created, we want to actually dispatch those. So we want to dispatch the actions that we had created. So we are going to be calling, of course, our store. So we're going to have store.dispatch. And then we're just going to use a curly braces, and then we are going to be giving it a type and a payload. So we want to use one of the types that we had created in our reducer, and the first one is the add type. Now I just want to mention that you have to use the exact case that was created in the reducer. So for example, if I had put in something like division when I actually don't have a division case in my reducer, unfortunately that won't work. So now we are just going to be giving it a payload of 200. So what that means is we have actually created our payload. And then what this payload will do is that it will take in the parameters that we had initially used in creating our store. And as you know, one of the the type we had in our reducer was an add type, and also it would take in the second parameter as well, which is 20. So it would do the addition of the payload that we are set it to dispatch for a certain type and add it to the parameter we had given it for the store. So we are also going to dispatch a type for subtract, because that was also another case that we had created in the reducer, and we're just going to give it the type subtract and payload 50. So that would also subtract from the argument, from the number we initially put in our parameter. So we also want to also dispatch our third case, which is the multiply case, and we would just set the type to multiply, and then we would set the payload to something. Because it's multiply, we want to give it a lower number, so we just set that to something 3, and we can then save that. And then but there's something else. We actually haven't dispatched we actually haven't added the state to our cases, to our reducer cases. So what we want to do is actually go back to each of the case we had created, and then we want to add our state. So we're just going to have state is equal to state plus, and we want to add the action, and we also dot payload. And so we're just going to have the same thing for subtract. So we're just going to have set the state to state equal to, but this time we're actually going to be using the subtract, because what we want is we want the type to be subtracted from our payload. And then for case 3, we're just going to have state and equal to. But for this case, we're going to be having using the multiplication because we want to multiply our payload value. So now we have all of this. So now we have all of the components that we needed for this Redux basic tutorials. So just to iterate on what we've done so far, we've actually used our dispatch function to actually dispatch the actions and the types that we had created in our reducer. And also we console logged our data. We want to actually view what the data looks like on the web. So we are just going to be going back to our web page and going to our console and to see what our output actually look like. One thing I want to also mention is that when creating a bigger application using Redux, there are also really useful methods and functions that can actually make your applications much more efficient. And so in summary, we can just say that Redux is a store where we actually create actions using the reducers, and then we use our dispatch methods or functions, and we use those dispatch functions to actually dispatch those actions to our web page. This is giving you a basic understanding of what Redux is actually all about. Thank you for watching.